that is what the explosion of ChatGPT in 2020, late 2022 did with bad accounts and fake accounts. It has gone from low 30% of all internet traffic coming from bots to over 55% now.
New data from a cybersecurity firm shows that over half of all internet traffic comes from non-human sources, bots. Now, that is an interesting stat all on its own, but I want you to focus on the next one. Over a third of that traffic comes from bad bots, malicious automated actors. What are they doing online? Misinformation campaigns, disinformation campaigns, basically targeting businesses and governments with irregular warfare, essentially to undermine the markets and democratic elections. And listen, we all knew this was happening, right? No one goes online in 2025 and doesn't see a bot posting some garbage. But are we aware of the extent of the issue? What these bots are after? This week on the podcast, we speak to Connor Ross, co-founder of Calgary-based Koat.ai. Now, Koat does real-time intelligence monitoring for businesses and governments, and they claim that they can decipher between a real and fake account within 10 seconds of it being posted online. Very, very interesting tech, but again, not the main focus. On this episode, Connor explains how the rise in bots is being driven by AI, how the bad actors are weaponizing AI faster than governments and businesses can respond in kind, and how the social platforms that enable this type of activity are really doing nothing to stop it. Connor also explains the motivations behind these bot use. You see, it's not about bots posting garbage on the internet. It's about bots posting garbage on the internet that real humans consume, amplify, and act on. And according to Connor, it's very effective and very, very dangerous. So, half the internet is bots, and they're all lying to you. What do we do about it? Let's dig in. All right, Connor, I am really excited to talk to you today, and I think the timeliness of this conversation will become pretty apparent to our audience as we dig into this. But I think the best place to start is to just have you describe exactly what Koat AI does, and we'll talk about what that gives you access to in terms of insights in the state of the world. Is that fair?
Absolutely, Douglas, and thanks again for having me. Koat.ai is an AI company out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where we specialize in open source intelligence. We provide comprehensive web intelligence with AI that solves a critical issue, which is data integrity and clarity in a complex internet environment. We specialize with proprietary algorithms that decipher fake account activity online in 10 seconds from post. So we're putting a spotlight on digital risks that comes with the internet. One of our greatest resources is publicly available information, and we source that information, curate, and clean it on behalf of our clients.
Gotcha. So who's buying this information about fake accounts?
Yeah, it is a threat to enterprise as well as government. And on the government side is purely threat to democracy. Bad actors are weaponizing AI at scale. And part of that is social media as the new attack surface. So what we do is we specialize in uncovering disinformation, defamation, and digital risk that comes from social media, because we're at an inflection point here where bad actors are weaponizing fake accounts to change narratives at scale for personal, financial, and political gain. So that is where we have ability to have applications to help irregular warfare support within governments, within politics, as well as Department of Defense applications and warfare support. But on the enterprise side, it is defamation and disinformation that can impact operations, reputations, and finances overall. Publicly traded companies that have global digital footprints need solutions and proactive intelligence in today's climates, because bad actors, competitors, and nation states are attacking enterprises as well as executives and board of directors. And that's what we have the ability to do, is uncover that disinformation and defamation that is targeting enterprises, because it is all about investor confidence, consumer confidence, and maintaining that in today's climate.
Okay, let's parse that a little bit, because my background, I came up in social media, or at least the first generation of it. I'm familiar with like a sentiment analysis. For the companies that I would work for, it's like, oh, no one no one wants our phone anymore. They don't like it, or they want this feature, or things like that. We're not talking about that organic conversation analysis. So can you pare down maybe the risks is associated to these fake posters? Is this the kind of circumstance where people are trying to like game stocks or things like that, or like where is the risk along for enterprise? And like if you want to take this to like any specific industries, I think that would be kind of helpful to see possibly even how it varies.
Oh, 100%, Douglas. We're at an inflection point where it impacts pretty much every business online. Everyone, the internet is our greatest resource. It allows us to understand market trends, consumer insights, and also have that information to make better decisions, right? So everyone utilizes the internet. It's nothing new. But what fake accounts do within certain target markets, we can look at financial services and financial markets. The perfect example is the GameStop fiasco, which got a lot of buzz in 2021. That was automated bot attacks that were using retail investors as a pump and dump. And that's exactly what bots were able to do. They were able to galvanize real people into a narrative. And that's exactly what these fraud farms were able to do with GameStop on that pump and dump. There was real people and retail investors buying this and being a part of that story. But what amplified that is fake accounts, because fake accounts are 6 times more effective at disseminating their messages online and grabbing true audience inflection points, because they do karma farming. They seem more real than real. And that is what the explosion of ChatGPT in 2020, late 2022 did with bad accounts and fake accounts. It has gone from low 30% of all internet traffic coming from bots to over 55% now. That is over a 3-year period, and it's increasing every year. So bad actors are weaponizing AI faster than governments and enterprises are using AI to combat it. And that is the issue here. And that's why we very much want to increase testing, adoption, and innovation within the government and enterprises, because we need to have clarity in this internet environment. We can look at public health as well, Douglas.
Yeah.
COVID-19 was a perfect example of fake accounts disseminating information and damning narratives that impact public health, such as drinking bleach as a remedy for COVID-19.
Yeah.
There's also fake accounts that impact public health studies, which also manipulate drug testing, and that impacts pharmaceutical companies greatly. We also see it in media and entertainment. Spotify and YouTube have a consistent issue of fighting bad accounts that are doing fraudulent streaming, which is stealing money from hardworking artists that are actually trying to earn a living through streaming. So fake accounts are impacting B2B market research surveys, financial services, public health. They really touch everything. Whenever they can incite violence, make a quick buck, that is where bots live and breathe.
I think this is a good spot for me to ask you directly what Coat's secret sauce is, how you get this data, and what kind of data you're looking at.
Great question. So we're building open source solutions on cloud and on-prem environments. What we do is we introduce scrapers to grab that intelligence from social media. We're a first-party aggregator, bringing in that information in real time. 10 seconds or less is our real time. So the moment that someone posts online, Douglas, let me walk you through kind of what our ingestion looks like. So someone posts, I just bought a Tesla. I'm excited for taking delivery. Within 10 seconds from post, we're taking that account, we're backtracking the personality of that account, because bots have distinct behavior that we model against. And when it hits critical threshold, we then put it into a sophisticated catch and release program where we have that account for its lifetime, and we get to understand what it promotes and demotes. But if it doesn't hit that threshold, we do have a suspect bot catch and release program that we monitor until it hits critical threshold to either label it organic or inorganic, for example.
Like, do people more spin up net new bots for their interests, or do they repurpose old bots towards a new purpose once they want to shift the messaging or the disinformation or what have you?
It depends on the effectiveness of those accounts, right? Because if there's a small fraud farm that is consistently hitting the metrics that they would like, there's no need to introduce new bot activity. But once these accounts get either shadow banned or someone has found them out to be an authentic account, and that screws up their messaging and their ability to disseminate, that's when they can enlist new fraud farms and new accounts, sorry. So all of it.
You mentioned that you were first party to grabbing and scraping this information. How are you compiling this so fast? Do you just have a better bot working on your side? Like what's the secret behind that?
I'm sorry, I can't dive into that one, Douglas.
No secret sauce? Okay, that's fair. Am I understanding you that you're saying it's less the broad noise of 1,000 bots saying one thing and more the specific accounts that are seeding ideas that then get organically amplified? Or are you seeing both types of activity? Parse us contextually in how this is being used and abused so our audience can really understand the state of play in 2025.
Yeah. And when we dive into what we're changing, sentiment analysis isn't anything new. You're a former marketer yourself. You've utilized these traditional tools. We are flipping these traditional tools like meltwater on their head, right? Because we're introducing AI and we're focusing on bringing all the relevant conversations around every specific company. Because baseline traditional sentiment analysis tools, they just grab a couple thousand posts around each company and give you a baseline subscription package.
Like almost like a traditional kind of survey thing. Like we've captured 1,000 respondents.
Exactly.
We can assume based upon that, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Exactly. So we grab everything for that client, which separates us, right? So volume, speed, and scalability of finding all the mentions from traditional media, social media, and fringe media. We can also look at dark web as well. We're giving you that broad extended coverage of grabbing every mention around your executives, your company, or any topic that is important to those data-driven decision makers, whether they're in security or in communications.
Okay. So then back to my question before, and you just mentioned the dark web, which is another component here.
Mm-hmm.
What is the behavior type that you're seeing that is causing the risk or the concern? If these organizations want to know where the conversation is coming from, you're able to give a more detailed breakdown of what's happening. Is it a signal to noise consideration where the organic conversation is being drowned out by a million bots now being amplified by AI? Or is it more these fake accounts are seeding conversations that are then being picked up by real people who might not know the origin of Genesis? Is it both?
It's both, but it's mostly the latter, right?
Okay.
Because bots are paid for engagement at the end of the day, Douglas. They were introduced in the early 2000s, like in the MySpace era and the birth of the internet, as a marketing ploy, right? To have these basic automation tools to just get content out and increase network effects. And then it got a little bit more weaponized once Facebook introduced Instagram, and they obviously utilized bots to bring in more audience and amplify advertising models.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not incentivized to fix the problem. These big tech companies such as X, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, they are feeding the issue. They do baseline removal of accounts each year, but it doesn't move the needle. I could show you a website where you can spend $500 and enlist 50,000 fake accounts to do your own disinformation campaign within an hour. That's how accessible these bots are. And that is why disagreement bots on Twitter, on X, I encourage everyone after this podcast to go just type in your chat bot, disagreement bots on Twitter. You're going to see a lot of articles where these fake accounts are trying to galvanize and demote companies, projects, consumers. And that is what they do. They're trying to wane consumer confidence towards a certain narrative. And that is exactly what their job is. And our ability and our job is to show you in real time, are the bots galvanizing real audiences towards a promotion or a demotion, whether that's a stock, a company, a marketing campaign, or even a brand reputational attack, because fake accounts are now consistently demoting executives, going after the corporates, trying to do short seller attacks, right? So they're usually using fear, violence, and disgust in their language. And that's how we have these emotional models through our API where we can dive way more granular into the sentiment, understanding who is fearful towards something, anger, surprise, angst. All those emotions are incredibly important when you pair that with the fake account analysis. Are they really galvanizing a real audience? Is that audience particularly interacting with that material? Are they now posting about that company and that subject matter online about that product recall or that product issue, for example? That is the intelligence that we're providing. It's a threat prioritization system to understand when to respond to these kind of brand risks.
You're leading into what my next question was: is when the companies that you're working for or the governments that you're working for get this information, what are they
Mhm.
supposed to do with it? Is it just confidence for them that it's not organically driven? Which I assume would be helpful if you're, on on the board and you're like, oh, the sentiment around our executive leaders isn't real, it's fabricated. But obviously the context here is that whether or not it's real or fabricated, the impact is still real. So
Exactly.
what are these companies doing with this information once they get it? And is there anything that they can do?
100%. Thank you for the question, Douglas. So, our value to the enterprise is working with these analyst teams that are specializing in threat intelligence, risk management, and threat operations. Our value is an efficiency play. We're giving time back to analysts because they don't have to do any manual aggregation or manual research from these publicly available sources. Our job is to create a central repository, one stop shop for all your intelligence needs from publicly available sources. So you have a dashboard and a generative AI product to streamline those investigations, improve that reporting, and streamline that communication to other departments as well as the C-suite. Because their job at the end of these days, these risk management and threat operations teams, their job is to report on imminent threats against the company, the executives on a daily basis. And our job is to give them all that intelligence as fast as possible.
Burger King realizes that people actually don't hate the Whopper, so they stop spending so much money trying to convince fake people to love the Whopper.
Yeah.
Is there any other behaviors that your client base engages after the fact with this that you've seen? I don't want to ask you like specific companies that have done things like I do, but I know you're not going to tell me. But like broadly, beyond just having confidence in the information and cutting down on the speed and the spend, I think we have to have a conversation about how much there can be done about combating what's happening online.
Great question. And I did just want to circle back just to the previous one, Doug, because we do both, right? I don't want to just miss the authentic information that we bring in, right?
Mm.
Our job is to validate if an account is authentic or fake in real time, but we bring in the authentic threats as well. But when we look at bot behavior and what they're doing with this information, we do have partners. And that's why we're so excited about the ecosystem that we're building as a Canadian tech company with US and Canadian partners. We want to be a full stop shop and have tools and resources in our toolkit to help streamline these investigations and take it a step further to true brand reputation and protection overall. So we do have partners, for example, that specialize in content removal.
Mm.
So if it does hit a huge inflection point where there's a damning post that is pure defamation and we have a legal basis to then draft a document and put that up to the platform companies, we can get that removed in a 24 to 48-hour time horizon at a very high success rate. So
Okay.
that is an example of a partner that we brought in to take it a step further, similar to the dark web analysis that I've mentioned previously. We also have a partner that we brought on to help streamline and support with that.
Yeah.
Public.
Let's talk about the dark web for a minute because I know at some point we're just gonna have to trace a little bit of the history of this
Mhm,
stuff and points of comparison. Because I think, for the average person, they might see indications of this, but what you're kind of saying is that in mapping it, you actually see the scale and breadth that any individual user online, um, by intention with these platforms, can't see.
mhm,
Talk to me a little bit about the dark web because you had noted that predominantly some of this stuff is being driven by almost like idea generation, kind of like mimetic dispersal of ideas, sentiments, angst, emotion you referenced. We definitely see that online. For people that have not been on the dark web, maybe to describe how you would define that and whether or not the behavior space there is any different.
Yeah, we're really excited about bringing in the dark web intelligence, and it is early days for us. So I'll be fully transparent, Douglas. I'm not going to be able to give you the full spiel on our dark web analysis, but what we're very excited about the project work that we have upcoming is mapping the correlation of bad actors and fake accounts on social media and what they do also on the dark web. That is the next inflection point of our company, is that complete comprehensive understanding of pairing dark web with public web. And that is exactly what we're looking on for partners. But the reason why dark web is so important in today's climate, Doug, is it is geopolitical risk at the end of the day. We're at an inflection point in the US where it's a very oligarchy heavy environment. High net worth individuals, executives, anyone of importance is very much on edge in today's climates, because what that does is it creates opportunities for bad actors to attack, both on the physical security side as well as digital security. This also comes with blockchain aggregation and investigation as well. So it's very important to pair all this comprehensive security, because executives every day have personal identifiable information leaked online, whether it's on the public web and the dark web. And it's even more dangerous on the dark web when these bad actors and more nefarious individuals are sharing that information and trying to use that information to inflict harm, both on enterprise and those key individuals as well. So it's very important and very needed.
Couple of things I'm hearing from you here is, one is that the dark web conversations, because they're a little bit more obscured, seem to be much more pointed in what's being discussed.
Yeah,
And would you say the public web is a little bit more mind share driven and broader movements towards being for or against individuals, data, information, research,
exactly.
political choices, stuff like that? I'm wondering how much you can break down your client base along those enterprises versus I'm assuming the government interest is quite different. Maybe that's the best way to ask that question.
Great question, Douglas. So we have got all of our clearances to effectively work with US and Canadian government late last year. And we brought on distribution partners that are helping us source those key contracts. We have an opportunity to do some great work within these agencies, both in Canada and the United States, where we can help impact public health studies with local municipalities and state governments, as well as look at irregular warfare support, because fake accounts are being weaponized at scale by all of our global adversaries and partners, truly. 80% of all elections that were surveyed last year had fake accounts involved in all elections globally. So I think we had 120 elections globally last year. So I think that gives you a key statistic on the influence within politics. So when we look at broad scale manipulation, we see this in great examples. A perfect example is just our elections, right? The new wave of manipulation is AI deepfake videos. As you have seen in 2024, that exploded. And that is just the first wave of manipulation that is coming, both on the audio and the video side. They have essentially programmed and adjusted video images of our political leaders that have incited violence, fear, and disgust, right? So they have the ability to disseminate faster information, right? Because these bad actors are automating their messaging and seeming more real than real. And then now they're pairing it with video and audio that can be just as personalized and automated as possible. So the dissemination of information is only going to get faster. And that is why it's so important to understand how these bad actors are going to weaponize AI as we continue building AI, because bad actors adopt AI faster than enterprise and government. The bad actor market's going to hit $1 trillion by 2030. It's just moving exponentially. So that is why it's very important that we need to, as Canadian leaders specifically, because I do have a little piece on Canada's issue with productivity to GDP and why this is our AI moment. But specifically, we need to test, adopt, and pilot AI faster than we have historically with technology.
The BetaKit podcast is presented by OVH Cloud, the global cloud provider you can trust. With OVH Cloud, startups and innovators are free to build on their own terms. No lock-in, no hidden fees, just transparent, sovereign cloud solutions. Choose from over 80 cloud services to build and scale your infrastructure, hosted in Canada and across 44 data centers worldwide. OVH Cloud puts you back in control of your digital journey with performance that never blinks. Start building today at ovhcloud.com. The BetaKit podcast is also brought to you by the BetaKit Guide, Wildfire. This winter, the world watched as LA burned. In 2023, Canadian wildfires scorched millions of hectares of forest and displaced hundreds of communities with huge costs to our climate and economy. The BetaKit Guide Wildfire explores the role of Canadian technology in helping to predict, prevent, and adapt to the global reality of wildfire. Presented in partnership with NorthX Climate Tech, you can read the full guide today at betakit.com/wildfire. Okay, so let's talk about AI. Because again, I think most people are familiar with the concept of this stuff. I think you're giving some useful and horrifying context to the scope and scale. Give us the eras of social media misinformation and disinformation. How has the playbook changed through those periods?
Oh, absolutely. The first inflection point, I could categorize this into 3 to 4 different time horizons. So the early days of the internet, birth of the internet, early 2000s, that was the MySpace era, as I referred to earlier in this interview. That is when bots were just introduced as that normal advertising play, just getting baseline content, making more friends, having that automated network. Then we have the early 2000s. That's when social media was really exploding. That is the early introductions of Instagram. We had acquisitions, Facebook acquired WhatsApp, all that fun stuff. That is the real inflection point here where we had a lot of automation, but we had no pure disagreements or divisiveness. But they were still utilizing it for network effects and allowing advertisers to get their buck. And that is exactly why all these platforms are so incentivized. But this is the age we're in now. Ever since 2022, we're in AI-powered misinformation timeline here. So we have the early MySpace area, which is basic automation. We have the early 2010s, which is the social media explosion age up until 2022. The introduction of GPT is just so significant when we look at bad actor market, because that inflection point was that high statistic of low 30%, high 22% of all internet traffic was coming from bots. And at the end of the day, there's also good bots, like the basic automation bots that are still utilized by these traditional, these social media platforms. There's great bots out there that do a lot of automated news and a lot of automated offers, but there's bad bots. And that is what is exploding right now. Automated accounts that are disagreeing, having certain messages that are dividing that public. So that's the inflection point we're in. That ChatGPT 3.5 release in November 22 has increased that statistic from the low 30s, high 20s of internet traffic all the way to 55+%. So that is a crazy explosion of automated fraud farming over a 3-year period.
And is that just accessibility, ease of deploying? Or was the previous era of bots more difficult to utilize? Was it more just cordoned off again amongst the dark web? Like pre ChatGPT, was it harder to automate this? Like were we not seeing it because those types of tools were more controlled, or are we seeing it more now because anyone can just go to literally a website and make this happen? I just really want to know the drivers here and how much it is the technology versus just the access to the technology.
It's access to technology. It's the introduction of GPT, because before, Doug, I'm not sure if you've seen on Instagram just some of those videos coming out of China and India where they have thousands of phones and they are all charged and they have to consistently go through them and get their messages out. That is still something that is done, but everything was manual before 2022. So they had to karma farm. They had to do this all manually. Okay. So now they have a tool that can automate all the response and allow them to seem human. with the generated content. And that's exactly what the explosion has done.
You had mentioned earlier that most of the social platforms haven't done much to combat this. We've also seen in this transition a lot of these social platforms go from being very, very open, both in like their API and data sharing access, to be incredibly closed. And they themselves moving from organic social posting to algorithmically driven media. Does the closing of these platforms and the algorithmic drivers made this worse? Or would you say it's just a function of these tech companies really not stepping up to stop this? I will get to the governments not being ready for AI. I'm wondering what you're seeing in response or defensive strategies from the actual platforms where this behavior is happening.
You see the platforms experimenting and trying to combat the problem in terms of good PR. Elon, for example, has talked about the paywalls that he wants to introduce to help combat this. But bad actors can get access to credit cards so easily. And what is $1 a month going to really do?
Yeah, yeah. So this is a good thing here. You had talked about you don't have to have a daisy chain of phones set up for this. Now, if you've just got a credit card or any sort of like digital debit card, all of those bots can sign up for a verified account now, and their behavior is actively being prioritized. Right?
Exactly.
Is it possible for in the behaviors that these bots utilize for the platform to identify it as a bot? Or do they have to do some of the analysis that you do?
These platforms know what are real accounts and
Okay,
authentic accounts, 100%.
gotcha. And they're just you would be your estimation that they are not making it a priority.
Facebook announces a removal of billions accounts mostly every year, but these accounts are created in the millions every day. So we understand that they do try to move the needle in terms of removal of these fake accounts. But once a fake account is removed, that same bad actor can just create a new one, right? So this is going to be a consistent exercise and a problem that could contribute to an internet dead theory at some point, which is that most, if not 90+% of our internet is going to be automated bots talking to each other.
Okay. So in that environment, how do we combat this? You had talked before that you're doing some partnerships with like takedown platforms and tools and company to kind of like make requests.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that still has to go through the platforms where these posts are happening. You had
Mm-hmm.
also mentioned that like governments just got to get up on their AI game here, particularly the Canadian government, to better combat this. What is ideally combating this look like? You know, we assume in a green sky world for your company, maybe a horrifying environment for the rest of the world. Uh Koat.ai has the universal license to provide every organization the data they need showing exactly where all these behaviors are happening. What's the actual way to stop it? Is it just takedown through the platforms? Is it like counter AI bots that are going around and directly removing at that level? Like, how do you actually envision a world in which we are limiting the impact of this stuff beyond just having really, really good data analysis that it's happening?
Great question. Proactive intelligence and security is a must for everyone in today's climate. So if we're looking on the enterprise side, um, we need to have these solutions because bad actors are weaponizing faster than everyone. Just like that's the consistent theme of this podcast is weaponization. So we need to have that proactive security and intelligence within these executives so that they can keep their finger on the pulse. But in terms of the individual and just us as a society, this is really just having Congress in the United States put these companies up against Congress on a
Mm,
consistent basis, asking them to really put them up on trial here for what they're contributing to, because it affects everyone. Fake accounts are utilized in anti and human trafficking. It's also utilized in public health. It's impacting people and harming lives. And that's exactly where 30% of Americans in the latest poll last year don't 30% of Americans actually don't even trust the news anymore. So that means they turn to social media for news. So that is even more scary when we're at an inflection point with social
Because
media being
you're
even
saying the
more
social media
manipulated.
is even worse. It's not real.
Exactly. So
Okay.
people need to trust data. And at the end of the day, what is that data? What does it look like? What's authentic? What is fake? And having all that information is more important now than ever.
We've seen Meta and Facebook in the past, and then recently TikTok as well, kind of called before Congress and Senate committees to testify related to this. But usually, it's much more upon the outcomes, the actual political sentiments or bias in favor of the content moderation. Knowing that you're tracking this, are you actually seeing the conversation get to the technical level of what is driving this? Or more again, because we don't have broad access to the data, just what these government officials are seeing as the outputs and complaining about liberal conservative bias and things like that? Like, are they aware of and are they talking about the tech that's powering this?
Oh, government specifically? Yeah, they talk about technology all the time. They know exactly that these companies are exacerbating the problem. It's just a matter of figuring out when are we going to finally hold them accountable for all the harm that they have done to public trust as well as to enterprises and other governments.
Okay. So then knowing that you are an AI company on the side of tracking this stuff, I'm also going to ask you then, can you make the argument as to why we should not just be regulating AI in the first place to prevent this ease of access? If this is the, you know, ChatGPT 3.5 is like their present, it's a consumer based app. You can kind of use it for free. There's a paid model where you get more like this is as democratized as uploading a video was made by YouTube.
Mhm.
What's your argument for us saying this stuff is so bad that no one can use it?
That is why KYC is going to be of the utmost importance because you're talking about the AI model companies as well. We can throw them in the exact same bucket as the social media companies. All these platform companies that need to do better KYC to ensure that there's no weaponizing of these AI models as well as weaponizing of accounts on social media. That is where we're not doing any damage, but we would love to obviously partner with anyone that is specifically highlighting KYC because you need to have proper vetting.
What I'm hearing from you though is kind of a similar argument to and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but when it comes to like the regulation of firearms, it's like the solution to bad guys with a gun is good guys with a gun. And then kind of what I'm hearing you say here is the solution to bad guys with AI is good guys with AI. I might interject and say the solution is maybe highly controlled and restricted access to AI in the first place. Is that even possible given the fact that like every global like nation state is trying to drive forward and win in this space? Like is the cat just out of the bag in terms of the technology here?
Well, the DeepSeek event is a perfect example of that. What China did with that DeepSeek announcement is flip the entire AI industry on its head. How can a company out of China with um, 300 times less of budget build an open source model that has all these capabilities? It's very scary, right? So China is a real threat. We've had numerous conversations with agencies that are very concerned about China and the AGI threat. That is one of the biggest concerns in the world, is if China can weaponize AI faster than the US, specifically on the AGI front. So that is where we really need to dive in and understand how are we going to properly allow access to these models. But the cat might be out of the bag already, Douglas. We don't have the answer. It is always going to go back to KYC and who is utilizing these models and what information are these companies gathering before giving them access and giving them the ability to weaponize.
Let's get down to that democracy level here. What do you want to see governments and particularly the Canadian government do to address this?
Well, firstly, the Canadian government, my first issue with Canadian government is the productivity issue and just where we need to create a more robust economy that supports entrepreneurship in Canada.
Mm.
So that I know that's a little off topic on the use of our technology and what is needed to fix the disinformation problem specifically, but Canada needs to ship up We have entrepreneurs leaving consistently now because of the environment that we've created based off of taxation, capitalization, and ability to raise capital and test and innovate in Canada. So that's first and foremost is we need to shape up and become and pull our socks up and really build Canadian business and adopt AI. Secondly, the government is finally distributing and supporting that Trudeau announcement of announcing $2 billion towards AI is finally getting deployed, which is great. So we're actually seeing some more government support coming our way in terms of that research and development and grants and access. Like Cohere had a major announcement for an energy play in Alberta, which is great Canadian news. So we need more success stories. We need to build up our startups and our scale ups, and we need to test and pilot and innovate. That's first and foremost. The government has done a great job in listing some programs. A good program I encourage people to read about once it reopens is the Digital Contribution Citizen Program, that is focused on fighting disinformation and doing some more social media studies to understand manipulation and doing more predictive analysis and correlations work to understand how markets are moving and how sentiments are shifting towards different issues, whether that's tariff conversation, border security, all these key issues that we're running up against right now. And that's why I'm so disappointed with just our tensions with the US right now, because we have a golden opportunity right now as Canada and US as true partners, both on the energy infrastructure side to support AI and these data centers that are going to be building this phenomenal tech, but also just being that export and import partner with Canadian companies and American companies being able to consistently do business across the border without tariff impact. We do need some change, and we need some policy that is introduced to allow AI to be adopted faster and embraced faster, as well as ensuring that we're protecting our citizens and ensuring they're safe as well.
I'm wondering if, just for our audience, having gone through an election and seen a result, you can give some very, very specific context about the impacts that are happening in Canada around the election. If people don't walk away from this episode looking to take this more seriously and become more informed, we will have failed. So give them some context here when it comes to that election that they should be thinking about, because our democracy doesn't end the minute after the results are in, right?
Great question, Doug. Essentially, all citizens just need to be wary online. Everyone needs to be cognizant of their social footprint and just be more careful with what information you're taking in, because these bots are karma farming. They're influencing, they're doing influence driving, and essentially you need to understand what looks automated. So take it a step further when you're reviewing these comments, and I highly encourage that everyone looks at Mark Carney and Pierre's social media. Take a deep dive and go through the comments. And then when you are suspicious of something that is fake or seems inauthentic, go to that account. Really just test it out and really go to that Instagram account, that Facebook account, and do a double check. Does it have consistent followers? Is it sending the same message? Does it look real, first and foremost? Really take a deep dive to really understand what these fake accounts look like. Because once you do this a couple times, you're going to understand what these anonymous accounts look like. They sometimes have very low followers. Some of them have high followers, but you really need to understand the low follower account ones. These are the fringe media anonymous accounts that can reach huge audiences because of their ability to craft their message and automate with that account. So try and do double checking of every information and understanding where you're ingesting that social media conversation, because you have no idea what you're reading.
Yeah, and especially if it's a third-party account screen capping what looks to be a traditional publication without providing a link or information, right? Because as you said, the whole intention of these bots is to get real people to amplify the messages that they're trying to seed, right? So, like, the buck stops with every person in Canada when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to amplifying this stuff.
Yep, their job is to get humans to do their work for them. And that's exactly what a successful bot campaign looks like, when they really galvanize an organic audience that is going to consistently comment and be a part of that narrative, whether that's towards a topic, a vertical, or a company. That is where we really need to understand bot activity fundamentally and what it's actually driving.
Okay. Connor, I really appreciate you taking the time today. This is a not fun conversation for me. but it is, again, helpful and informative. So I really appreciate you sharing some data and context with what you're seeing online.
No, I appreciate the opportunity, Douglas. Sorry for the not fun conversation, but I hope I illuminated some issues that are really of importance today.